योगः कर्मसु कौशलम्.
Hello friends, Namaskar. Today with us Dr. Jayendra C. Jadhav. He is working as an assistant professor, Gujarat Commerce College. He has 11 years teaching experience. He is a member of different university, like a board member in account subject, Gujarat University, board member in commerce subject, Guru Govind C. University, board member in commerce subject, Kavi Narsi Mehta University, and he is published more than 32 research papers, and as a speaker more than 100 national and state level seminar. When today he talk on higher education in India, provision of National Education Policy 2019. Sir, I welcome you on behalf of HRDC and all the participants. Sir, I request you deliver his session. Dr. Jadhav, sir.
Namaste to all of you. I welcome you on behalf of Gujarat University. Today we will discuss on higher education in India, history, current scenario and challenges. I am Dr. Jayendra Singh Jadhav. I am serving as an assistant professor in Gujarat Commerce College. Friends, we know that higher education is the key for sustainable growth and development of any country, because it educates the people in real ground. It widens their mind, enhances the thinking capacity, develops rational thinking and increases the analytical power of the people. Moreover, it creates job opportunity, it makes the students fit for the job, it helps in framing the economic, agriculture and industrial policies of the country. It makes aware of the present socio-political awareness among the people, it makes democratic citizens and engages them in the nation building process. The knowledge obtained through higher education leads towards research, and with the help of this research, new knowledge is being discovered in different fields. Sir Ashutosh Mukherjee, he was the Vice Chancellor of Calcutta University. He had aptly described the meaning and purpose of higher education in his convocation address. This convocation address was delivered in 1922. He said that, to my mind, the university is a great storehouse of learning, a great bureau of standards, a great workshop of knowledge, a great laboratory for the training as well as of men of thoughts as well as of men of action. The university is thus the instrument of the state for the conservation of knowledge, for discovery of knowledge, for the distribution of knowledge, and above all for the creation of knowledge and its makers. On the similar lines, Benjamin Disraeli has rightly said, a university should be a place of light, of liberty and of learning. Friends, let us understand what is higher education. Generally, it starts after finishing the school final examination. In India, at present, it is clearly stated that the higher education started after the class 12th final examination in different form. For example, general honors degree or undergraduate course in college and universities, master or postgraduate in universities, technical education, teacher education and management education. Research and so on are the category of higher education. In single line, it is the post higher secondary education system in India. India's higher education system is the third largest in the world, next to the United States and China. Means, as far as higher education is concerned, United States is first, China is second and India is the third. The main governing body is the University Grants Commission, which enforces its standards, advises the government and helps coordinate between the center and the state. Accreditation for higher learning is overseen by 15 autonomous institutions established by the University Grants Commission. As per the latest 2011 census, about 8.15%, and in number it is 68 million of Indians are graduates, with Union Territories of Chandigarh and Delhi topping the list with 24.65% and 22.56% of their population being graduates respectively. So, Indian higher education system has expanded at a fast pace by adding nearly 20,000 colleges and more than 8 million students in a decade from 2000 to 2010-11. As of 2020, India has over 1000 universities with a breakup of 50 central universities, 402 state universities, 125 deemed universities, 334 private universities and 7 institutes under State Legislature Act, and 155 institutes of national importance, which includes IIMs, IITs, IIITs, IISERs and NITs, among others. Other institutions include 52,627 colleges as government degree colleges, private colleges, standalone institutions and postgraduate research institutions functioning under the MHRD. So, we can say that the large number of institutions are working in India as far as higher education is concerned. Let us go to the history of higher education in India. India is believed to have had a functioning system of higher education as early as 1000 BC. India was a center of higher education at that time. Friends, we know that Takshashila, Nalanda and Valbhi were center of excellence. In Takshashila University only, there were 10,500 students from all across the world. There were 5,000 teachers who were rendering their services as a residential teachers who were gurus. See the healthy teacher-student ratio at that time. It was 10,000 students and 5,000 teachers. It is 2:1. During its times, this university was the IIT and MIT of the world, where the students from all across the world used to come to attain specialization in over 64 different fields of the study like Vedas, grammar, philosophy, Ayurveda, agriculture, surgery, politics, archery, warfare, astronomy, commerce, futurology, music, dance and so on. There were even curious subjects like the art of discovering hidden treasure, decrypting the messages, encrypted messages and many others like this. Some of the students who graduated out of the Takshashila University, it includes the great political master Chanakya. Panini was another great product of this university. He was an expert in language and grammar. He has authored one of the greatest work on grammar ever written called Astadhyayi. Another great student from Takshashila University, he was Pandit Vishnu Sharma, the author of the great book that teaches the art of political science in the form of simple beautiful stories called the Panchatantra. Another fellow, Charak, the famous ancient Indian Ayurvedic physician, was a product of Takshashila University. We have thousands of this type of examples who have studied in ancient Indian universities and established a great tradition of innovation and knowledge. I can say that this was a golden time of Indian higher education system. After this time, many invaders and destroyers came to India and they tried to destroy an original knowledge system of Indian society. The modern Indian education system finds its roots in colonial legacy. The British government used the university system as a tool of cultural colonization. Colonial efforts in higher education were carried out initially through the East India Company, followed by the British Parliament and later under direct British rule as well. The first institution of higher learning was set up by British East India Company was in Calcutta in 1781. Friends, this is a root of university system. This was followed by the Asiatic Society of Bengal in 1784, Banaras Sanskrit College in 1791 and Fort William College in 1800. With the Charter Act of 1813, the British Parliament officially declared Indian education as one of the duties of the state. The same act also removed restriction on missionary work in British India, thus leading to the establishment of the evangelist Shrirampoor College in 1818. It was a part of strategy to do missionary work under the umbrella of educational institutions. Friends, we all know Macaulay's famously controversial minute on education. It was in 1835, reflected the growing support of Western approach to knowledge over an Oriental one. Soon after, in 1857, the first three official universities were started in Bombay, Calcutta and Madras, followed by the University of Allahabad in 1887. These universities were modelled after the University of London and focused on English and the humanities. The British control of the Indian education system continued until the Government of India Act 1935 that transferred more power to provincial politicians and began the Indianization of education. This period witnessed a rise in importance of physical and vocational education as well as the introduction of basic education schemes. When India gained independence in 1947, the nation had a total of 2,41,369 students registered across 20 universities and 496 colleges. In 1948, the Indian government established the University Education Commission to oversee the growth and improvement of higher education, which was led by Dr. Sarvapalli Radhakrishnan. With the recommendation of Radhakrishnan Commission, in 1956, Government of India established an authority for higher education institutions. It was University Grants Commission. So, UGC is established in 1956. In the 1960s and 1970s, the government increased its efforts to support higher education by not only setting up state funded universities and colleges, but also providing financial assistance to private institutions, resulting in the creation of private aided granting aid institutions. Despite the departure of British, Indian higher education continued to give importance to the languages and humanities until the 1980s. Institutes of professional education like Indian Institutes of Technology, it is IITs, Regional Engineering Colleges, it is REC, and Indian Institutes of Management, it is IIM, were some of the most prominent exceptions to this trend. These institutes draw inspirations from reputed universities in the United States and also received foreign funding. Post 1980s, the changing needs of the economy, a growing middle class and an increased strain on government financial sources slowed the growth of state funded higher education institutions. This led to an increased role of the private sector in education system. It is what we can see today. Today, we are also going to discuss about the challenges in higher education and the public policy and governance reforms that are needed in addressing each of these challenges. I just to give you a perspective of Indian higher education system, which in itself is overwhelming. India has a little over 930 universities. As we talked earlier, India has nearly 50,000 colleges, and these colleges are different forms of colleges. You know, private colleges, publicly created colleges, affiliated colleges, and all kind of different types of colleges. And then you have over 5,000 business schools, which are standalone business schools affiliated to a university, because only a university has the degree awarding authority. And then you have little over 1,300 law schools. So, it is a relatively large higher education establishment, and at a time At the dawn of Indian independence of the year 1947, we had only 20 universities. And in the last 70 years, the higher education sector has dramatically and quite substantially expanded. However, there are many crises, and I have used the word crisis of higher education quite consciously, because I do believe that the higher education system in India is facing different forms of crisis, and we need to respond to it. And I do hope that public policy governance and regulatory reforms can address some of these challenges. It is also useful to mention that there was a point of time in history when India did play, and it started in the leadership role in higher education. I had the privilege to be a visitor at the University of Oxford, which was founded in the year 1249. And when I visited the Oxford, one of our guide, who was a research fellow there, he said that we are the oldest college in English speaking world, and they will celebrate the 775th anniversary in the year 2024. So, in one of those occasions, I was very surprised by his constant reference, the oldest college in the English speaking world. And I said, so why do you always say this? He said, I have proud of my alma mater, and we want to be with this legacy which is established by our forefathers. He said, do you know your country had universities long before? And he reminded me about the Nalanda University and Takshashila University, which were founded over 2700 years ago. As I talked earlier also, Nalanda University at its peak had over 10,000 students. It was a multidisciplinary university with students learning astronomy to algebra to philosophy to literature to music to theatre. So, that type of leadership was played by India at a point of time in history. Of course, the Nalanda was destroyed, but there should be an effort to reinvent and recreate Nalanda. And there has been a university created through an effort made by South Asian and Southeast Asian governments, but the larger problem of India is a question of how do we respond to the contemporary challenges of higher education. So, with that sort of preface, let me just begin by saying that this crisis that I am talking about in the Indian higher education system is embedded into a larger set of problems and challenges. First challenge is creating the vision and mission of institutions. I do believe that most of all Indian universities are not being created with a view to providing transformative leadership within the country. It has not been created with the vision and mission to seek and address some of the most fundamental challenges that are confronting the world at large, not alone Indian society. There is high levels of mediocrity deeply embedded into both the creation as well as the evolution of most of Indian universities. At this mediocrity and has resulted in a situation where the crisis is deeply embedded in almost every aspect of governance in relation to higher education. I can just mention in the context of vision and mission that if you, for example, look at the central universities of the country, which are really leading institutions to the country, and many of those institutions that provided a lot of leadership as well as contribution towards research and knowledge creation. These are the universities such as University of Delhi and the Jawaharlal Nehru University, which is JNU, and many other institutions. There are nearly 50 central universities of country. Believe it or not, these universities have approximately 40% faculty positions lying vacant. Even IITs and IIMs, which we are very proud of it and who have contributed significantly, not only towards ideas and perspective, but also leadership in technology and innovation. including the development of Silicon Valley. I have to confess that these institutions have approximately 35% faculty positions lying vacant. And of course, these are not a question of lack of resources, but the heart of the problem of these faculty positions lying vacant is a question of governance, and we will come back to it all through the talk. So, in some ways the vision and mission of Indian higher education institutions needs to be reinvented and radically transformed with a view to addressing the issue of quality, but also to fulfill another aspirations of India, which is to be able to create world class institutions. After vision and mission, let us move to second challenge. The second, of course, the second major challenge or issue in Indian higher education institutions is the question of autonomy and regulation. I think it is recognized widely that Indian higher education institutions are over regulated and under governed, and that also means that is a sort of a bunch of regulation in India. It's pretty much to regulate everything that an institution does. So, right from formulation of curriculum to cost structure to program development to faculty recruitment to the student admission process to formulation of courses to curriculum to also to assessment to examinations, that is not a single aspect of higher education is not regulated by the government or any regulatory body. Sometimes they regulate through regulatory bodies created such as the University Grant Commission, the Bar Council of India, the Medical Council of India and many other such regulatory bodies. And most of these regulations have had noble intentions when they were created, interestingly mechanisms with a view to maintain equality. However, over the years these regulatory mechanisms undermine the ability of Indian institutions to evolve and clearly develop visions and imaginations on their own. There is also a major challenge with regard to regulation. Most of these regulations have envisaged the idea of the most crooked form of institutional imaginations to their belief and every attempt to create that regulation is to somehow stop the dubious people to be able to do, to stop them from doing things that are not in the best interest of the institutions, but in that process any new imagination, innovation, creativity that educational institutions, that universities could provide is not possible because of those regulation. So, autonomy in higher education is need of an hour. We know in ancient era also universities were funded by state only, but they never created regulatory norms for HEIs. Even they do not intervene in regular teaching learning process. The Maharaja Sayajirao University of Baroda is the best example for it. Maharaja Sayajirao established a Baroda College where there were not any interference of the state. Management and governance was in the hand of teachers, and that is why we were able to attract great personalities like Sri Aurobindo and Dr. Babasaheb Bhimrao Ambedkar. So, I can say here autonomy is the soul of an institution. In some ways, if you really want to look out at public policy and governance reforms to respond to this challenge, we need to look at the fundamental objective of regulation. What is the purpose of regulation? How do we regulate institutions, higher education institutions, yet maintaining autonomy and also more importantly promote creativity and institutional imagination within the institutes? To what extent government bodies and regulatory bodies can work collaboratively with the leadership and the faculty within the academic institutions to be able to address some of the biggest challenges of higher education. The third is a big issue related to funding and resources. Now, of course, it is a next point which I am going to make comparison about public and private. That is one of the things that India is aspiring to do, is to is to be able to create opportunities for the young people of India. You may be aware about 800 million people in India are less than 35 years of age out of 1.3 billion people. Just look at the figure, 800 million people less than 35 years of age, and of course, India life expectancy is increasing quite substantially, and this 800 million people are going to be living longer. This is also ties in well with a situation where good part of the Western world, the demographic dividend that India is going to have is going to be an important competitive factor when good part of the Western world and larger parts of the Eastern world would become older. India will remain younger and will be younger for a longer time. All of this means that this demographic dividend that we have in India can only be benefited for both India and the world at large if we can focus on higher education and the opportunities that we are going to give for the young people. And that also means that you need resources. We require huge fund. The country spent 3% of its total GDP on education in 2018-19 or about 5.6 lakh crore, the economic survey said. A small country like Cuba, Cuba is spending 12% of GDP on education, while USA and UK is spending 6% of their GDP, which is quite more or double than us. The percentage in GDP which we would like to have in towards the higher education spending is not seen. And every time there is a lot of efforts are to be made to galvanize political consciousness towards that. Of course, we also have a challenge of the multi-layered framework of Indian higher education system. I mentioned about the complexity of higher education sector in a very brief. You have the central universities which are created through the parliamentary legislation process. You have the state universities which are created through the state legislative assembly process. Of course, you have the private universities in the states which are also created through the state assembly processes. We have also the deemed universities which are created through regulatory process within the Government of India through the University Grants Commission and the Ministry of Human Resource Department. With the complexity of different types of institutions, the funding and resources framework does face a challenge. If there are challenges to the public universities in general which are created at the state government, it may not be a challenge for private universities. In fact, there is also a lot of stress in relation to the private universities, and that comes back to the point about the public versus private, which is the fact that in India that both are facing different challenges. The large Indian higher education establishment historically has evolved through the governmental investments in public sector and public education, and the larger universities continue to be public education and publicly funded. However, it is also a fact that the funding to the various disciplines is big reduced. However, it is also a fact that the funding to the various discipline is being reduced. It is quite significant reduction in funding. In fact, many areas such as disciplines related to humanities and social sciences are under serious threat. And of course, more and more attempts to create professional education in relationship to advancing professional education has become the norm in many of the public policy interventions. All of this means that we need a lot more resources, and unfortunately most of the efforts to create the sources is only coming through governmental initiatives and not outside the government. In fact, the evolution of the great public and private institutions in this country is a stellar example of how both the public and the private universities are seeking resources outside the government. And the growth and the evolution of philanthropy is something which we in India need to invest quite substantially. And we also need to recognize that the public or private character of universities. We have more to do with their functioning and their outcomes and their contributions, and less about their creation, means less about their type. And this is something which India needs to recognize sooner than later, although things have become much better now than say 2 decades ago, when the idea of private universities was completely anathematic to the idea of higher education. Of course, I am very conscious personally about the need of private, not for profit, philanthropic oriented higher education institutions. I am personally opposed to the idea of profit making institutions, and I do believe that education should continue to be a public good. The common good word investing, and investing by both the public sector as well as the private sector. In this regard, there are a number of innovative measures that are elsewhere proposed, including a need of substantially drawing upon an important legislative measure that India took few years ago, with which is to pass legislative for corporate social responsibility, CSR funding, corporate social responsibility funding. In fact, India is probably the only country in world which has actually created the legislative framework, which requires in some form the private sector, the multinational corporations, as well as Indian companies and corporations and business enterprise to contribute 2% of their profits towards CSR funding. And of course, this is very interesting because it was not mandated before. However, the corporations are expected to provide a compliance mechanism and a reporting obligation why they are not doing this. Of course, this creates an opportunity for corporations to contribute to the society. There is a high degree of compliance in this measure, although as to where the money is being invested and really going is a subject matter for a huge controversy. There have been instances where corporations have contributed CSR funding towards employee welfare and other kinds of things which are clearly not what CSR funding was expected to go. However, with there is a clear recognition that billions of dollars are indeed going to be generated through the CSR process of 2%, as the Indian economic growth has moving towards constantly between 6 to 7% in the next some of the years, might even it go to 8 to 10%. Due to COVID, it has been reduced, but still we have a ray of hope that it would be in double digit by 2025. If that is the kind of economic growth that India is going to witness, it will also mean that a large number of companies and corporations, their own income and their profits will increase, and their own contributions towards CSR will also increase. All of that means that we need to go beyond the expectation, and that the state is going to fund a higher education, although one should argue and probably exert pressure on the state to contribute to that continuously. So, in some ways this existing dichotomy that prevails between public and private institutions need to be significantly altered, and that we need to recognize the cost of higher education is the responsibility for everybody, including the public and the private sector. We also need to recognize that higher education in particular should be a not profit activity, in which private contributions should be based upon philanthropy as well as ability to create institutions, excellence in the institutions. I can only, for those of you are interested in why I strongly believe in this, is in this notion, I can refer you to an absolutely stellar book by Harvard political philosopher named Michael Sandel. It was the title of the book, Why What Money Can't Buy. The Modern Limits of Market, in which he talks about the idea of increasingly we are moving into a society where everything is up for sale and you can buy. And he talks about the consequences of such a society where everything is up for sale. It can buy it to consequences being corruption and inequalities. Yeah, of course, it makes it up for first to United States, but this could be arguably and connected to most of every society in the world, including Indian society. So, that is the question of public versus private. I quickly move on to the other challenges related to universities, including teaching and learning pedagogy. Now, this is of course a major concern in India, the question of faculty as well as the central role of universities to be institutions where not only knowledge creations that happens to research, but also dissemination of knowledge it happens. A part of experiential learning and inspiring ecosystem for faculty to engage with students is also a need of an hour. Now, here the big challenge that India is facing today is the question of who are the people who are coming into the teaching. The fact remains that teaching is no longer an attractive profession in number of ways in track. I have not personally done the empirical research on that, but since I have observed from the year 2008, people who do not survive anywhere, they think to become a teacher. I have read an article where researcher has surveyed among the last semester students of best universities of India, including IITs and IIMs. He has asked question to the students that how many of you would like to become a teacher or would like to become a professor, and the answer without exception across institutions, across region has been nil or 1%. So, there is a huge degree of mediocrity that is deeply institutionalized in higher education institutions, where best and the brightest are not aspiring to come into higher education. Even the second best are also not choosing this field. So, we do not have more teachers by choice in a system, we have more teachers by chance. And so, this is a very serious problem that we need to address as to how do we create new forms of vision and imaginations that will bring in many Indian students and graduates to come into academia. Of course, while all of this is happening, many of the Indian academicians have become leading academic scholars in the Western world. So, talent retention is also another challenge for India. If you look at the last 2 or 3 decades, you would find an extraordinary increase in Indian academicians becoming professors across the United States and also many other universities around the world. And by the way, there are not the Indians who are born and brought up in the United States. I am talking about the Indians who have studied in India, went to the school and college and universities in India and had come to the United States for their higher education and then go on to take up academic positions at USA. And of course, the point which I am really drawing your attention is that academia across disciplines in India is not an attractive proposition for graduates in many disciplines. And so, this is something which we need to address, and we see the mediocrity deeply embedded, and because of which both teaching and pedagogy related teaching are affected. At a later point is the fact that while academic freedom is important and indeed central to university governance, that is also need for talking about accountability of academic themselves. Most Indian institutions, particularly public but also private, would not have had an opportunity to let the students assess the performance of the teachers in classroom at all. The idea of teaching feedback questionnaire is largely anathematic to the Indian higher education establishment, and if any attempts to infuse even a marginal degree of accountability will lead to stiff resistance from most academic institutions, and that is something which we need to address. I also want to highlight quickly the research and knowledge creation aspect of it. One of the reasons why not a single Indian university is one of the top 200 at the Times Higher Education rankings offer. Fortunately, we have 2 Indian institutions in QS ranking this time recently, but it is very less in number. The other ranking is the fact that good part of methodology for assessing this university constitutes research and publications and citations, while at best Indian institutions are teaching institutions, none of them truly research institutions. So, they do not get good rankings in the world ranking. And of course, we know that for research to happen, you need outstanding faculty, you need an ecosystem unit, of course, funding and resources, you need all kinds of support, and that is why there is a major challenge in relation to creating opportunities for research and knowledge creation, right, because of which we have a challenge in relation to the contribution of faculty towards publication, and poor citations has also affected the ability of Indian institutions. So, play a leadership role. The growth and evolution of Indian institutions in the last several decades is primarily a story where we believe in expansion and not one of promoting excellence to the institutions. So, this is a very sad story in some ways, because to provide access to education to a large number of people, to improve a GER, it is a gross enrollment ratio, we have neglected the need for maintaining given minimal standards of quality that can indeed aspire to promote excellence. So, in some ways, even with the expansion or the focus on expansion, the gross enrollment ratio in India is approximately 24%, and our aspiration is to reach over 50% of the years to come. As it is suggested in National Education Policy 2019 also, we have to reach up to 50% GER. But of course, for that we need to have another, as it was predicted by our education minister a few years ago, that we need 1000 new universities in the next 10 to 15 years. If we were to increase the gross enrollment ratio from what we have to another 10 points above, of course, we did not create 1000 new universities, because we knew that we did not even have faculty members for the existing universities, and of course, resources and all of that. So, we need to address the question of how do we create opportunities for different and diversified institutional imaginations. We need to really innovate to think about how we attract the best of the best faculty members in universities and colleges to think about higher education at present. It is not uncommon that to say that the bottom 10, 20 or even 30% of the graduates may enter into higher education, but how do we attract the top 20% of graduating students across different disciplines to think about coming into academia in India? What are the institutional mechanisms that are needed that ought to be designed, including the ecosystem, be it in a relation to the compensation, funding resources, as well as grants, as well as other things that are needed to create that ecosystem, is something which we need to think about. I also want to briefly discuss about rankings and assessment. I think one of the promising things that have happened in India, of course, there are number of controversies surrounding rankings anywhere that is controversial, including USA or other country or our country. You all know that if you talk to the vice chancellors, provost and the presidents of the universities, they would somewhat say that ranking is not everything. So, the story is uncommon, be it in Oxford or Cambridge, but also in other parts of the world. So, we need to be conscious of that, but at the same time what ranking does is it shows some sort of a mirror in the way in which an institution is functioning, and how do you benchmark yourself with other institutions. But more importantly, how do we assess the performance of these institutions, and what really you counts, but in some ways what is important and valuable may not at times to be counted, and what is probably not so valuable gets counted. There are internal regulatory and policy and regular governance reforms initiated by this pressure that is exerted through the rankings. And so, I have to confess that the Times Higher Education rankings, the QS rankings as well as the Shanghai Jiotong rankings are creating some sort of attraction. It is shaking up an old giant, an elephant, waking up from its long slumber. And so, I do believe that rankings have an important triggering factor, and it is happening as we speak in India. At the same time, this current effort, galvanizing certain consciousness, academic consciousness and intellectual consciousness in India in relation to improving quality and standards cannot be a myopic approach purely driven by the efforts to get some of the Indian universities in the top 200. It has a major, more systematic and more sustainable, and that involves, as I said, a reassessment of the regulatory architecture and the public policy that is currently focusing on higher education. I want to briefly mention that any reform effort in India in higher education needs to recognize the larger focus of institution building. Institution building is central to nation building. If we start recognizing that institution building is central to negligible nation building, then we start valuing higher education institutions as much more. Unfortunately, that may not be seen in case of India. There is enormous intellectual capital that is prevailing here in the country. There are huge, there is something to be said about the growth and evolution of ideas, and that is defined definitely, but unfortunately institutions are to be the bedrock around which these ideas get evolved and nurtured. In a conclusion, I would like to say that we know the importance of quality higher education. It directly influences the all aspects of development of a country and helps the country to stand high in the global platform. In India, during the periods of 70 years, the higher education has developed a lot in terms of quantity. However, we are still lacking of quality higher education as expected. To improve the quality of higher education, the concerned authorities have to concentrate on the parameters such as sufficient infrastructure, updated curriculum, trained faculties, learning resources, financial help and well planned policies. It is only the quality of higher education that can establish India as world leader to lead the world of 21st century. We wish that with the collaborative efforts of government, teachers, parents and society, we will be able to see the transformation in higher education system. As our tradition says, let's have noble thoughts from all the directions of world. It is Ano Bhadra Kratavo Yantu Vishwatah. We are ready to implement best practices of globally reputed universities. And lastly, I would like to quote Srimad Bhagavad Gita, where Bhagavan Krishna has rightly said about creation and importance of knowledge. He said, Nahi jnanena sadrisham pavitram hi vidyate. Indeed, there is nothing purifying here comparable to knowledge. So, knowledge is everything. At the outset, I am very much thankful to HRDC Gujarat University for providing this opportunity to me to express my thoughts on higher education. I am especially thankful to Dr. Chandrakant Brahmbhatt sir for his able guidance to deliver my session in this faculty induction program, Guru Dakshata. I express my gratitude to Dr. Jagdish Joshi sir, Director HRDC, for his continuous support and motivation. And last but not the least, I convey my best wishes to all the participants of this faculty induction program. Tamaso ma Jyotirgamaya.
Thank you very much, sir. Sir, your today's session is very knowledgeable and useful for our participant. Sir, I am thankful to spend your valuable time for us. I am again thankful to sir on behalf of HRDC and all the participants. Thank you very much, sir.